Welcome to WPIAL Wednesday post-game show for Friday Night Sports Night. The Friday Night Sports Night post-game show here, and Chris Ransom joining me with Kyle Taylor, and this is the Friday Night Sports Night post-game show presented by WPIAL Wednesday on TalkShoe and Draft Utopia. But let's dive into the very first big news. We know Pine Richland won. They're 2-0 now, but there's two big games. Not sure if you could call them monumental upsets, but they're big upsets that really set the stage for next week because Peters Township has defeated Seneca Valley 13-8, and then to top that off, you saw Bethel Park. They defeated North Allegheny. They handily defeated them, so you're going to have an unbeaten Bethel Park team and an unbeaten Peters Township team next week in Peters Township after they got that win over Seneca Valley. So what are your thoughts on these two upsets, and any thoughts on either one of these teams heading into this week?
Well, I thought that's why I was so intrigued with the Bethel Park North Allegheny game, because I figured that was going to tell us a lot about 6A, who could be maybe another contender there with Pine Richland in that game, and it showed that Bethel Park has stepped up, and they might even be the favorite. I wouldn't call them the favorite in 6A because you still have Pine Richland, but I think that they certainly have moved up to the top two. And Peters Township, that was a nice win. I think that they might jump into the top five now, so that South Allegheny Conference is looking a lot stronger than we gave them credit for earlier on. So definitely looking forward to that game next week. That will kind of tell us maybe how good Peters Township really is.
Yes, it will. And Peters Township is one of these teams that really surprised a lot of people. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen this upcoming season with all of the standings for because Pine Richland is 2-0 in the 6A Northern 7 Conference. They're running away with that, but Bethel Park is 2-0 and Peters Township is 2-0. Peters Township went 1-5 last year in conference play, and they went 4-6 on the season, and here they are at 2-0 in a position where they can challenge Bethel Park for first place, because Bethel Park is the team that finished second to Mount Lebanon. Mount Lebanon lost to Pine Richland today, and now you've got Pine Richland at 2-0. You've got Penn Hills at 2-0. Penn Hills is an easy schedule right now. They're going to fall apart at some point because Penn Hills has NA Central Catholic and Pine Richland all on the road this year, which is tough for them. So even if Penn Hills is in second, right now you've got Pine Richland, and then there's still too much to be decided as to who's going to come out of the Northern 7. And we could still see Central Catholic run the table in the WPIAL. So even though they lost early in the year, they could still end up running the table in the Northern 7 like they did last year, because they went 6-0 in conference play last year. Central Catholic did. So they got their first conference win tonight. So there's still a lot of football left to be played. And we're going to get a better idea in the coming weeks of who that team is going to be. So right now, Pine Richland has the advantage in the Northern 7, but the Southeastern Conference, you've got two unbeaten teams in Bethel Park and Peters Township. And what's interesting about this is Peters Township allowed the second most points in the conference last year, but their defense really stepped up versus Seneca Valley. But Seneca Valley just lost a lot of talent. So to watch Peters Township beat them like that, it's just big upset. And Bethel Park actually had the fewest points allowed in all of the WPIAL conferences last year. Central Catholic had 90 points allowed in WPIAL play, but Bethel Park only allowed 88 points in conference play last year. So Bethel Park's defense is actually really good, but it was the offense that ignited tonight versus North Allegheny. So Bethel Park might actually be a challenger to get to Heinz Field. a legit contender, like you said a few weeks ago on our preview show.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I don't know, but people in Bethel Park, they've been saying this team reminds them a lot of that WPIAL title team in 2009 where they went all the way to the state championship. So they weren't lying. You know, they were speaking the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Bethel Park's probably going to beat Peters Township next week, but it would be cool to see Peters Township continue their underdog story. I'm trying to figure out what team is in jeopardy. I mean, Shaler and Butler look like the pretenders at this point in the WPIAL 6A division, but there's still so much football left. Outside of Butler and Shaler, I think everybody in 6A still has a shot because it's just so early in the season at this point, Kyle, to the point where I don't think you can write off a team just yet. So that's just my thoughts on the WPIAL. I think right now we can preview one more 6A game between Central Catholic and North Allegheny, two teams that we expected to be 2-0 at this point heading into this game, and they're both 1-1, and whoever loses this game is going to be 1-2. They're going to fall behind probably a 3-0 Penn Hills team and a 3-0 Pine Richland team, and they're going to have to win out and play a lot of catch-up. It's not impossible for either one of those teams to catch Pine Richland, but all the breaks would need to go their way, and it's both. Whoever loses next week's game at Newman Stadium between Central Catholic and North Allegheny is really going to have their back pinned against the wall the rest of the season.
Exactly. I mean, that's now turned into a game where we thought both teams would be coming in maybe 2-0. Instead, they're both coming in at 1-1. So that has a little bit more significance when you stack the chips as far as the Northern 7 Conference and just the 6A class overall. I mean, that's big to start 1-2 with their remaining schedules. And as far as playoff seedings, because remember, only 8 teams make the playoffs. So at that point, now you got to be now you got to be almost looking to gather wins just to make the playoffs at that point. You'd be looking at the outside looking in, even a playoff spot. So that game will have a lot of significance next week.
Yep, as will Bethel Park versus Peters Township, because Pine Richland, if it ended today, Pine Richland would probably be the top seed. The winner of Bethel Park, Peters Township, is going to be in a great position to control their own destiny and possibly get the 2 seed. And then after that, it's wide open as to what other 6 teams are going to get in the 6A playoffs. I think we're going to see Central Catholic in it. I think we're going to see NA in it. But again, you fall to 1-2, you're in great jeopardy of not getting a home game in the first round of the WPIAL playoffs, and all the games are at neutral locations too. So even if you're the home team in a neutral location, it's still a neutral location. So yeah, I mean, that's a tough break. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen here, because I think Pine Richland with Central Catholic coming to their place and then them having the only road game against NA at Newman Stadium, that really puts those teams in a really difficult situation. And we talked about 6A, and there's just a lot of teams where you don't know what they're going to do yet. Even though Penn Hills is 2-0, the schedule works against them. Mount Lebanon's 1-1. I don't buy Cannon McMillan. I don't buy Altoona. Altoona got crushed today. I think it was Hempfield or Norwin that beat them, but there's another team in the Southeast that might be 2-0. Let's take a look at 5A now and go through what happened in 5A, because West Allegheny is still unbeaten. McKeesport, they suffered a pretty big loss to came up out of nowhere and really took them by surprise. And here's an interesting stat about Franklin Regional. Last year, their defense allowed the fewest points out of any team in the Big East Conference. They beat out Gateway for the fewest points allowed on the defensive side of the football within conference play. And you saw them play with that defensive intensity tonight versus McKeesport. We sort of just dismissed them as last year's season was a fluke, but they really came out firing. So now you've got Franklin Regional at 2-0, you've got Gateway at 2-0. The Big East Conference in 5A is wide open. I mean, Upper St. Clair's 1-1, North Hills is 1-1, Fox Chapel is 1-1. I mean, you got a bunch of 1-1 teams, and then West Allegheny in the Allegheny 9 Conference. But on the flip side of that, you also have the Big East Conference. I think Hampton's actually 2-0 after going winless last year as well, so that's another surprise. Hampton was winless last year; they're 2-0 as well. So, I mean, outside of West Allegheny, who? What's a good question to ask for 5A? Bigger surprise team, Hampton or Franklin Regional? I'll let you answer that.
Well, I haven't. I just saw Hampton's 2-0. I haven't been able to watch them yet, but I have been able to watch Franklin Regional. Was able to catch a little bit of that McKeesport game tonight, and their defense is legit. I mean, when you can hold the McKeesport team who averaged 35 points a game last year to 7 points, and that offense could just not move the ball. They were everywhere. Franklin Regional, all in the backfield. You just could not get that triple option going. McKeesport couldn't. And, their defense was, McKeesport's defense, held them in the game. I don't know how great Franklin Regional's offensive attack is, but their defense is certainly for real. So if we're comparing Hampton to Franklin Regional, I think I like Franklin Regional because they have a big time win. They beat McKeesport, so I'd give them the edge to Franklin Regional.
Yeah, Franklin Regional really stepped up in this game with a critical win over McKeesport here, and this is going to be interesting to see what happens because I'm trying to figure out when Gateway is playing Franklin Regional because that's going to be a huge game because Gateway and Franklin Regional are both unbeaten now. So I'm trying to figure out when that game is because Gateway won again. They're 2-0, and it seems like that division is going to come down to Gateway and Franklin Regional instead of Gateway and McKeesport, like we originally anticipated.
Are they in the same conference?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So
and
that will have conference bragging rights.
Yes, it will. I mean, Gateway has. I think Gateway actually ends the year at Franklin Regional on October 27th in Murraysville. So if both teams continue to win out, both of those teams could be unbeaten heading into that game on October 27th.
And you know how there's always great games that final week of the season, with the rivalries and stuff, so that could elevate this rivalry to the next level.
Yeah, it could. It could really elevate the rivalry, and Gateway's schedule at this point, after they beat Greater Latrobe, is pretty easy. They get Hampton at home in 2 weeks, which is going to be a pretty interesting game, and then they get McKeesport at home on the 20th, and then they get Franklin Regional. So those are really their only tough opponents are McKeesport and Franklin Regional. Gateway benefits from not playing West Allegheny, and since they beat Woodland Hills at Woodland Hills in a neutral game, I feel like they could run the table and be unbeaten heading into the game against McKeesport and Franklin Regional. They could be a team that runs the table up until that point and then loses the final 2 games and then loses their edge. But they just seem like a team, Gateway, that with their schedule, they could go on a run and win a few games in a row up until McKeesport and Franklin Regional.
I agree with you 100%. I like Gateway a little bit more than Franklin Regional at this point, just because Gateway has been there, in the recent past to get to Heinz Field. But that's something that's gonna, we'll see how the cards play out, and that could be very interesting in that conference.
I mean, Connellsville, I don't see Gateway losing to Connellsville. They get Armstrong High School. They get Hampton at home. They go to Penn Trafford on the 29th. Not sure what to think of that. They play Plum at Plum High School. Plum just seems like they're going to be terrible. Kiski area on the 13th at Gateway, and then they wrap up the year. Their home finales against McKeesport, and then the 27th they get Franklin Regional. So Gateway just feels like one of these teams that's going to cruise by until the end of the season, just because of their experience and what they've done so far. I would not be surprised if they were the team that really took control in the Big East Conference in the WPIAL so far this year. So, I mean, can anybody challenge West Allegheny? Because I think West Allegheny's probably going to run away with things because they've already got a 1-game lead over everybody besides Hampton at this point. So I feel like West Allegheny's going to run away with that conference again. But what's going to be interesting is to see whether Gateway, Franklin Regional, McKeesport, Armstrong went 7-1 in this conference last year. So I'm more interested to see what's going to happen in this conference than I am the Allegheny 9, because it just looks like at this point, even though a lot of the schools in the Allegheny 9 used to be rivals with NA, it just looks like West Allegheny's running away with that conference, whereas the Big East Conference, you don't know what's going to happen, and that's what makes that conference more fun and more interesting, you know?
I agree 100%. It's like the old Big East College Conference where, maybe wasn't as good as, it didn't have the top line of power as the other conference like West Allegheny, but it was always wide open, and it made for a lot of parity and a lot of fun to see what would come out of it. But yeah, harp on what you're saying, that West Allegheny, they're I think the best in 5A. If not, I think the best team in the whole WPIAL. I think they can beat any team in 6A as well. So, yeah, I think it's their title to lose at this point.
Yeah, and let's look at 4A now because, 4A, you've got some interesting headlines. It looks like Thomas Jefferson's going to run away with the Big 9. I'm going to look up Trinity's record because Trinity did defeat West Mifflin earlier as well. So
yeah, that West Mifflin was my surprise team to get behind the field. So either Trinity's for real or I was off on that prediction a little bit. But it's early, like you said.
I'm looking up Trinity High School. It's in Washington, PA, which is probably the closest high school outside of Chartiers Valley. But Trinity did defeat West Mifflin, and yeah, Max Preps had Trinity being the worst team in the state this year, and they stuck it to West Mifflin. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen here with this Trinity football team, whether they can build on what they've accomplished in the early portion of the season. So that's definitely going to be an interesting, because I'm trying to get the Trinity information, and nothing's showing up. I'm trying to get Trinity's schedule, see if they're 2-0 or whatnot, and we're not getting any of that information at this point. So that's kind of disappointing, but Trinity's a team that could be a fun team to watch down the road because they pulled off a huge upset tonight, and Ringgold, I just feel like Thomas Jefferson's going to run with the Big 9 in 4A because Thomas Jefferson won again, and the Northwest 9 Conference just feels like the conference that's going to have more parity because you had South Fayette is 2-0 now, Mars is 1-1, Montour is 2-0 now. So Montour, a team that went 4-6 overall last year, is already 2-0, and Newcastle's 0-2 to begin the year this year. Blackhawk High School lost to Knock tonight, so Ambridge won. Ambridge was winless last year, but they scored 40 points tonight. So, this conference, it looks like South Fayette's going to run away with things in the regular season again, but it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And this is a team that started really strong in the regular season, but they let down a lot of people in the first round of the WPIAL playoffs last year, losing after dominating in the regular season. And yes, South Fayette's got a lot they need to prove. So can they build on what they did last year and try to make a run to Heinz Field? That's going to be the big question. And with Newcastle at 0-2, Newcastle's in a lot of hot water unless they clean things up real quickly.
Yeah, what about Montour? What do you think about Montour starting off 2-0? Do you think they have any chance to make a push to Heinz?
Montour has a chance if they keep playing the way they did. They beat Newcastle 42-21, and This was their opener. So this was their opener, and what's even more impressive about this game is they actually went into Newcastle and beat them by 21 points. So this was that's a road win. Yeah, I mean, that's an impressive win. You can't ignore that. And their home opener is in 2 weeks against Mars. So that's going to be a big game in 2 weeks. If Montour can build on what they did. They play Indiana High School next week, and I'm pretty certain that Indiana lost. Plum defeated Kiski in a who cares type of game. I'm trying to get a result on Indiana, but Montour just demolished Newcastle, and this is just pretty. West Mifflin was up 26-24 over Newcastle. With West Mifflin led. West Mifflin came back and took a lead over Trinity with 3 minutes left. I thought Trinity defeated West Mifflin, but West Mifflin came back to take the lead. So I'm looking here. Mars is making an excellent case to be the #1 ranked student section in the WPIAL. Their crowd is just insane, and Pine Richland's got another insane crowd as well. So Cannon McMillan beat Hempfield. Union shutout Stowe Rocks, and Thomas Jefferson just took care of business again. So I'm really curious to see what this Montour team's going to do, because this is the kind of statement when you need to make to get your school on the map in the WPIAL standings, Kyle. Going in on the road, beating a Newcastle team that a lot of people are talking up, and beating them good, beating them on the road, dropping 42 points on their school district in their own stadium. That's the kind of win you need to get your foot in the door.
I agree with you 100%. It looks like, this 4A class is going to be kind of wide open. Doesn't seem like there's any true legitimate runaway team. I mean, you could talk about the Thomas Jeffersons or South Fayette.
Well, South Fayette has to travel to Montour on October 27th. So if Montour can win out and just win these games, they could go on a bit of a run, maybe do some damage control. And it's possible we see South Fayette versus Montour in Montour on the 27th. Now, the crowd and Montour would be electric if those teams both ran the table. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty big stuff,
I agree with you. What about what happened down in AAA today?
All right, let's take a look at what happened in AAA. 3A, we had Keystone Oaks. They were in AAA today, and I'm pretty certain that they won. Keystone Oaks went unbeaten in conference play last year. So Shadystide Academy got humiliated by Seton LaSalle, Seton LaSalle is in 3A, so that's 3A news, and they won that game with 35 points. Armstrong defeated Moon. So Moon Township was defeated by Armstrong. That was just breaking news. And that is, I think that's actually 5A news, but yeah, Washington High won, so there's a lot of different things that happened this week. Cannon McMillan, I think that's 4A though. But yeah, I mean, this game, it's just looking like it's going to be pretty crazy to see what happens here, because Quaker Valley's 2-0 now, Aliquippa's 2-0, Beaver is 2-0. Beaver Falls lost, but you look at all the schools. Central Valley, I think, won last week too, so you've got Aliquippa at 2-0, Central Valley 2-0, Beaver is 2-0, Quaker Valley is 2-0, and Beaver Falls is already in, 5th place now, just by losing to Aliquippa. Beaver Falls is now in 5th place in that division, which is pretty big news, because you look at Franklin Regional, they won. Apollo Ridge defeated Deer Lakes 34-21, so Apollo Ridge is unbeaten. So Apollo Ridge hasn't lost yet. Keystone Oaks probably hasn't lost yet. Gateway beat Latrobe. just looking through these scores here, and Norwin shut out Altoona, South Park 1 and 2A, Hampton. Just looking through these scores here, and there's just a lot going on with Beaver. Beaver took a 28-0 lead. Avonworth shut out Carlinton. I think Avonworth is 1A though. I thought they were I thought Avonworth was 3A, but they're 2A. So I mean, Aliquippa with this statement win was probably the biggest story in 3A right now, and that's just really just insane that we saw that happen. But I'm thinking with 3A, Aliquippa is probably the team to beat. But it's going to be interesting to see if one of these other unbeatens like Central Valley or Beaver, or even Quaker Valley, who's 2-0, who was my sleeper for 3A, if one of these teams can actually put up a fight against Aliquippa. Because I think Aliquippa is running away with
the question. It's Aliquippa and then everyone else. So
I think it's
that's a conference, and you're really not going to know till the end. I mean, of who else is going to emerge as an opponent for Aliquippa to destroy in the WPIAL championship, in my opinion.
Yeah, and with 2A, which we didn't touch on, I think the team in 2A to beat is... Oh, wait, there's 3 divisions in 3A. There's the division with Derry, Mount Pleasant, and South Park. And South Park did win this week, so yeah, that's 3A. Technically, that's 3A. There's the 3 conferences, Allegheny, Beaver Valley, and the Interstate Conference. So Mount Pleasant won. We didn't talk about the Interstate Conference when we went over these games in our preview show. So I'm looking at Mount Pleasant. I know Derry went unbeaten last year, but I feel like Mount Pleasant or South Park has a chance to challenge them. So that's pretty neat. And Washington Washington went unbeaten in 2A, but I think Steel Valley's the team to beat in 2A. And with 1A, I'm leaning Clareton High School in 1A, but it's still pretty early. Jeanette looks like they've had a pretty strong team. I'll run through the Max Prep schedule for week 3 and see if there's anything exciting, because I think that's the final segment for this show where we can preview. We've done a good job, and even though we've been on the air for almost 30 minutes now, I want to get this show up by 10:30 at the latest, and it seems like we've covered everything. So I'm going to see what games are happening next week and what implications those games are going to have on the WPIAL, and then we'll call it a show. Does that sound good, Kyle?
Yeah, that's fair to me.
I mean, this is just... It's pretty interesting to see what's happened through 2 weeks. There's still a lot of football left, but at the same time, it's pretty interesting to see that you've got a few teams that are actually surprising people, and it's not the teams that we thought. So I'm just really curious to see who's going to build on their momentum next week, because we've got a lot of big games in 6A through 5A in different schools. So I'm just really curious to see who's going to build on what they've accomplished. So I mean, there's a lot of games that could really be interesting games, and I think with Penn Hills playing Cannon McMillan, that actually does have some implications, because Cannon McMillan is 1-0 and Penn Hills is 2-0. Both of those teams are unbeaten, so that actually does hold some substance when you consider that both of those teams have difficult schedules down the stretch, so that's going to be a huge game for both teams. So that's actually a game that has some pretty significant substance. Hampton is 1-1. They're not 2-0, so that is unfortunate for them anyway. So then we've got Blackhawk and Mars. Blackhawk and Mars both coming off defeats this week at Mars. That's a rebound game for both schools, and I think whoever wins that game, that's basically an elimination game because whoever loses that game is going to be in a very difficult situation in 5A, I believe, or 4A. I think that's going to be a trap. That's going to be an elimination game, don't you think? Blackhawk Mars with both teams at 1-1 now, or both teams with 1 loss.
Yeah, I mean, I like Mars in that game.
It's a home game for Mars, so I like them. Wow, North Hills 1-1. North Hills faces West Allegheny at West Allegheny. I expect West Allegheny to blow North Hills out and continue to build on the momentum they've obtained throughout the year. That's going to be a big game, and I sort of expect West Allegheny to pull away in that one. There's some games here. Penn Trafford's 2-0. I thought Penn Trafford's 2-0. They're probably going to beat Plum, and Penn Trafford is a team that was in, I think Penn Trafford was in either 4A or...
They were in 4A. They were in the 4A title game a couple of years ago and lost to Central Catholic.
I'm trying to remember what... Penn Trafford's actually in 5A with McKeesport and Gateway.
Yeah, they're in 5A now.
So Gateway, you've got Penn Trafford and Franklin Regional. They're all unbeaten. So Penn Trafford's a team we're sleeping on. We've been talking about Gateway and Franklin Regional this entire show, but keep an eye on Penn Trafford as well. Armstrong is 2-0. They're also, so Apollo Ridge travels to Beaver Falls, and that's going to be a must-win game for Beaver Falls at home because Apollo Ridge has actually started off well, and with all the teams Beaver Falls is falling behind, that they have to win that game. That's not even optional. They have to win if they want to get back to Heinz Field and repeat or have a shot of getting their revenge on Aliquippa, which I don't even think is going to happen after how sloppy they played. Fox Chapel and Woodland Hills will both be 1-1 next week, so that's going to be an elimination game. That's going to have a lot of huge implications in 5A. Newcastle faces Highlands on the road. Both teams are winless, so if Newcastle loses, it's pretty much over. I mean, they have to win in Highlands. They have to steal one.
They better steal one over Highlands. Highlands ain't that good.
Yeah, and both teams are winless, so whoever loses that game, that's pretty much a game, a must-win for both teams, because whoever loses that game, they can pretty much hit the golf course. They're pretty much done. So there's that game. Steel Valley plays Avonworth, and Avonworth, huge win this week. So can Avonworth pull the upset on Steel Valley? I'm going to say no, but that could be a single A game to keep an eye on. And Trinity faces Thomas Jefferson next week. Wow, that's actually got to be the 4A game of the week, Kyle, with how well Trinity's played versus West Mifflin this week. That's going to be the 4A game of the week next week. Thomas Jefferson should win, but Trinity's going to make that game interesting.
What's our AAA game of the week?
I'm not sure yet, but I would think that's the 4A game of the week. Trinity and Thomas Jefferson. You also got Bethel Park and Peters Township next week in 6A too.
That's probably our 6A game to watch.
Yeah, I know Central Catholic, North Allegheny, both are 1-1, but that game has lost a bit of its luster, and it's sort of turned into an elimination game. I mean, whoever loses that game is probably going to be playing on the road as a 5 seed in a neutral field. So that's huge because that could end up having huge implications. Montour faces Indiana next week, which we talked about. So I think Quaker Valley with the home game. I mean, Ambridge is playing South Fayette. South Fayette should be at 3-0. I think South Fayette's going to continue to do what they did last year. So, I mean, these 6A games are pretty interesting so far because a lot of different things could happen. I would think that the 3A game is going to be It's got to be I'm looking to see what who Aliquippa plays or some of these other games because I don't see anything for I see Fox Chapel, Woodland Hills, but that's an elimination game more than a game of the week. I don't see. It's strange. I don't see Aliquippa on this list. I see Apollo Ridge, Beaver Falls, and I sort of feel like that has some substance. McKeesport plays Armstrong at Armstrong, and Armstrong's 2-0, so that actually could be a pretty good 5A game next week, with McKeesport coming off this heartbreaking loss going to Armstrong, who is 2-0 and has the home crowd on their side. That game actually has some bigger implications than I realized, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know that Armstrong was 2-0, so it's kind of almost a must-win for McKeesport if they want to bounce back to, to at least salvage my prediction of them going to Huntsville.
Yeah, because you start 1-2, you're going to have to win out. You're not going to be in a good situation. As long as you have less than 3 losses, you have a chance. But if you have more than 3 losses, that's usually when you're done unless you can win out. And that's just sort of how I see some of these games playing out. Altoona plays Butler, and that's a Butler game. I would think the 5A game of the week's North Hills and West Allegheny because of just how close North Hills made that game. North Hills looked like the better team earlier today against Upper St. Clair, but they just couldn't maintain their momentum. I would say the 3A game of the week is probably just... It's hard to say. I mean, there's so much left to be playing. I'm looking to see where Aliquippa plays, but I honestly don't know where they're playing. I'm looking through the schedule. I can't find anything, and I'm curious to see what happens because Aliquippa is supposed to run away with their division. Yeah, this is just really getting crazy because there's a few weeks left, and Plum plays Penn Trafford. That's going to be an easy win for Penn Trafford. They're going to be 3-0. But Apollo Ridge and Beaver Falls, I would say that's the 3A game of the week because Beaver Falls came off a shutout loss, and Apollo Ridge has a ton of momentum. They have more momentum than Apollo Creed after he defeated Rocky Balboa. So that's a huge game, even if only because what's happening right now, and with Beaver Falls coming off the embarrassing loss the way they lost, I would say that's a game of the week in 3A. The 6A game of the week's probably Bethel Park Peters Township. I hate to say it, we slept on both of these schools, but they're both unbeaten. So I would say that's the game of the week, and we'll see what happens because this is going to be a huge week 3, and it's going to shape up a lot of what the projected WPIAL playoff picture is going to look like. Any questions before we sign off, Kyle?
I like the 5A matchup with Franklin Regional. That's the game that I look forward to. My spot to replace McKeesport is a chance to get a Huntsville, so I'm going to be watching them intently. 6A, at the Peters Township at the park game. 4A, whatever Thomas Jefferson and South Fayette are doing.
Yeah. There's a lot of different games this week, and I think right now it's going to be really... I'm looking at that Peters Township game. That's going to be a big game, and I'm looking at a lot of these elimination games because those are going to be huge games, and South Fayette looks like they're going to maintain their momentum, but I'm curious to see who's going to build on what they did last week because Seneca Valley's in trouble with this loss, with this home loss to Peters Township. They host Pine Richland next week, and they're probably going to lose to Pine Richland. So if they don't beat Pine Richland, they're in jeopardy of missing the playoffs because they still have to play NA. They still have to play Central Catholic. It's like if Seneca Valley loses to Pine Richland, they're in trouble.
Yeah, they already in trouble.
because this was a game they needed to win in front of their crowd. They didn't do it, and now they have Pine Richland at home, and then they're going to have NA at home. So they get some of their tougher opponents at home, but they have to win those games because they're really in a bad situation right now. And another elimination game that could be fun is Hempfield versus Mount Lebanon. I mean, Hempfield's actually been pretty impressive this year, so we'll see. Oh, Aliquippa plays Beaver next week at Beaver. That's the 5A game. That's the 3A game of the week. That's 3A game of the week.
Triple A game of the week. That's our final one to look at.
Yeah, that's the final game to look at, and it's a beep damn it moment because it was right next to NA Central Catholic, and I didn't even notice it until now. So we'll end on that note with Aliquippa Beaver, Bethel Park Peters Township. A lot of good football next week. Phil Jerkovic invades the Seneca Valley Nation and upsets a lot of Raiders fans, or will the Raiders fans get the best of Jerkovic? You'll have to tune into next week's edition of Friday Night Sports Night. For more information, recaps, guest appearances, you can message me on YouTube or email me for opportunities about coming on as a guest. We'll be back next week to break down more stuff for Friday Night Sports Night. Not sure we'll do a WPIAL Wednesday yet with football season coming up because I feel like we covered a lot of what we needed to cover for this week as well as previewing next week. So great show, Kyle. We'll talk in a week from now.
All right, sounds good, buddy. Have a good night.
You too.